around your opponent. You're making a lot of harder reads where you have to predict what your opponent's doing correctly because you're going to lose a Pokemon very easily. And we're going to see probably a play that's going to lead into that right here, where we've got Kangaskhan and Lucario out at the same time. I've seen Gavin play this matchup before, and a lot of them make some really daring plays in it sometimes. So he's going to have to be careful how he uses this here. We're also kind of seeing the matchup here. We're going to see a lot of this sort of thing. We see Kangaskhan on one side and a team very dedicated to countering Kangaskhan on the other. Gavin has that Lucario. He's also got Gengar on his roster. Salamence with Intimidate. So he's got a lot of options here to try to slow Kangaskhan down. You'll see a lot of that today where players realize that Kangaskhan probably the best Pokemon in this format, so you've either got to use it or find ways to shut it down.
And Arash is going to immediately retreat his Kangaskhan, wants to protect that, seeing that Lucario out on the field. In comes the Salamence. You can see the Intimidate is going to go ahead and drop the attack of both the Heat Rotom and the Lucario. Might have an effect on that Lucario. We have seen some specially based Lucarios, as Will-O-Wisp is going to come out and burn the Lucario. Sableye using that Prankster is going to be able to get that off onto the Lucario. Close Combat comes out, burnt and intimidated. Yeah, you could say it's not very effective, dealing just a very tiny bit of HP there as defenses drop, and the Will-O-Wisp coming out from the Heat Rotom. Arash correctly identifying that Heat Rotom could potentially burn that Kangaskhan and effectively make it as useless as this Lucario is right now.
Yeah, great play by him there. You really can't risk taking that early burn on Kangaskhan. It does have some ways to get that attack back. Most people using that power-up punch, which gets it 2 levels of attack, effectively negating the burn. But you don't want to take it for free, especially when you don't need to. Salamence comes in. The burn's a little unfortunate, but takes very little damage from Lucario here. So nice positioning play by him.
It's going to be interesting to see if that burn, the chip damage from that burn, is going to be a factor in this game here, as that Lucario, now burnt and intimidated, is going to switch right out for Ludicolo, which we've been seeing a lot of since the United States Nationals. Swagger coming out from Sableye, a classic. It wouldn't be Worlds without Swagger. Into the Protect there, as Draco Meteor is going to connect with that Ludicolo. Ludicolo very specially bulky, but does take a critical hit for about 50% HP there. Salamence getting off some good damage.
Yeah, a little surprising. We don't have too much information here, but with a critical hit doing that little, I would expect there's an Assault Vest and a Ludicolo, and Salamence likely to be holding Choice Scarf is the most common item for it, but it could still be a few things. But Ludicolo coming out here, sort of the same thing as Salamence the previous turn. It threatens that Salamence with likely holding Ice Beam, and it's bulky enough that Salamence isn't really able to do much to it. So Kangaskhan going to be careful it comes in here. It's free switch on Ludicolo, but could be worried about burn, so I guess we see Tyranitar instead. Yeah,
Tyranitar coming in right now, going to kick up the Sandstorm. Is going to be able to bulk up its special defense using that Sandstream ability. Swagger coming out from Sableye. Looks like Sableye is basically just going to be content to annoy Gavin in this game. Attack sharply raised on the Heat Rotom. Is it going to be able to connect? The confusion comes out, and Rotom is going to be able to connect with the Will-O-Wisp onto the Tyranitar switch in. A great prediction there from Gavin. Using that burn onto the Tyranitar, no Lumberry means that burn's going to stick on Tyranitar, and most likely going to be dealing, making Tyranitar not too thrilled.
Yeah, definitely not. Even if it's a mixed Tyranitar, usually the Rock-type move is going to be a physical attack just because there really aren't good special Rock moves. So Tyranitar is going to be at least a little hampered here, especially in its ability to deal with this Rotom. I'd be very excited that I got that Will-O-Wisp off there. I'm confused with the Will-O-Wisp mischance. You're actually more likely to miss it while you're confused than you are to get it off. So a big deal there. Not as big of a deal as Kangaskhan have been the one that came in, but a smart play with using Ludicolo's Ice Beam to kind of cover the Will-O-Wisp. If Salamence had stayed in, it would have been Ice Beam. Since it switched, you get a Will-O-Wisp and a physical attacker, so a smart play that is going to work out well for you there.
Yeah, but it looks like the Heat Rotom realized that it won the gamble there, is going to switch back out for Lucario. Still burnt, but no longer intimidated. Swagger is going to connect with that Ludicolo, though. Arash is going to roll the dice again as Ludicolo is confused, but still dancing. Rock Slide comes out, but the burn is going to make sure that it doesn't deal too much damage. Not very effective on Lucario, but does get another critical hit on Ludicolo. Ludicolo wishing it was Mega Slowbro right now with that shell armor. Just not having a great day so far. And connects, it hits itself with its confusion, survives with 5 HP, but that Sandstorm damage is going to be enough to get the KO for Arash.
Yeah, the poor Ludicolo just couldn't catch a break there. Had 2 critical hits, one through its Assault Vest and one through a burn. So, variety of ways that Gavin's trying to reduce the damage from Arash's side, but it just doesn't seem to be working out for him so far this game. We also have the burned Lucario back out here. It's still going to be able to easily deal with this Tyranitar if it gets an attack off, but Sableye is still out there creating problems. We haven't seen a whole lot of Sableye in this format because it's a weak offensive Pokemon. It can't do a whole lot of damage. The one damage move it uses fairly effectively is Foul Play because it uses the defending Pokemon's attack. But it does have a lot of great disruptive attacks, and a lot of them are really effective against this team. With the combination of Swagger and Will-O-Wisp, you have a move for both physical and special attackers. And I think Swagger probably the more frustrating of the two to play against. The one you're, it's a little less. There's more variety in what can happen, I guess.
A little bit more counterplay there.
Yeah, and in Gavin's case, he's got 4 special attackers, so it's going to be very effective against his team.
Yeah, and we can see the Swagger coming back out onto that Heat Rotom. That's why we see, Sableye tends to find itself getting ignored just because it doesn't have that heavy offensive threat. But, you can see the Swagger coming out as Lucario is going to connect with the close combat. Doesn't matter that it's burned, is going to pick up the KO on that Tyranitar. Easy KO there, easy clean KO as Lucario's defenses do drop. And it looks like Sableye will finally have a chance to take some damage, potentially, if Rotom can hit through the confusion. It does manage to connect through the confusion. That Thunderbolt going to start dealing some important chip damage onto Sableye as we see the Sandstorm damage coming back through as well.
Yeah, at least gets it into range of Overheat now. Evens the score at 3. So, both sides still in this game for sure. One thing that's interesting here is we don't see the Lucario Mega Evolve a second time there. Very likely it's either not holding a Mega Stone or he brought a second Mega in the back. There are 2 other options on Gavin's side. He's got both Tyranitar and Gengar who can Mega Evolve. Gengar's certainly the Pokemon that's more likely to do so, I would say, but I guess you could go either way. We've seen a lot of support Gengar using that Focus Sash and Will-O-Wisp. It doesn't seem like it would fit that well on this team, but it could definitely happen. Tyranitar also used sometimes as a Mega. We see it with the Life Orb on Arash's side here. There's a lot of different ways you can build it. It's one of the reasons it's very difficult to deal with in this format. So I guess we'll have to see what Gavin's last Pokemon is, especially if it is a Mega, because not too often you see a player just choose to go without.
Yeah, and it looks like Kangaskhan is out on the field. And finally, our first appearance of Mega Kangaskhan. Probably the first of many. I expect to see him or her throughout the tournament. But interesting to have the Kangaskhan on the field right now up against both this Rotom Heat Rotom and the Lucario. Of course, the taunt is going to make sure that no Will-O-Wisp come out, and the power-up punch does get the KO onto that Lucario, of course, with the close combat drops there. Only gets the 1 hit, though, so only 1 boost of the physical attack, but the Will-O-Wisp unable to connect thanks to the taunt from that Sableye. So Sableye, just sort of sitting on the sidelines and making sure that Gavin can't execute his plan.
Yeah, for a Pokemon that will not be carrying any attacking moves, it's had a huge impact in this game. We do see Salamence as the last Pokemon for Gavin here, which, eventually it's going to have a Mega Evolution. It doesn't yet, so no Mega Evolution for Gavin's side here. You don't always need one. You are giving up the item slot for that Mega Stone, so there's some games where if you aren't using a team with 2 Megas, sometimes it's just better not to bring that Mega. I'm a little surprised to see that decision here. We'll see if it pays off for him, but we do have 2 Pokemon likely to be special attackers out against Sableye and that Swagger. Kangaskhan's got that level of attack already, so it's going to need to be a situation where Gavin deals with this very careful if he wants to win the first game. However, get some good information here. We've seen Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, and Swagger from Sableye now, so it doesn't have one of Recover and Foul Play. It's good information we're trying to figure out.
And it looks like Salamence is going to go right on the offensive with that Dragon Pulse, likely calling out that it's Choice Scarf going first as well, and the return is going to connect. Salamence barely hangs on with that 2 HP. We'll have to see if Sandstorm will be able to get that KO as well. Overheat is going to connect from that Heat Rotom onto the Mega Kangaskhan. Is it going to be enough to get the KO? Yes! Kangaskhan does go down. Heat Rotom does pick up the KO there. Unfortunately, drops its special attack, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult to deal with the Salamence in the back. Foul Play, that attacking ability does come out as we see the Citrus Berry activate on Heat Rotom. Going to recover a little bit more HP. And we'll have to see the Sandstorm finally subsiding. Salamence hanging on with that 2 HP and the Dragon Pulse up against Arash's Salamence. Theoretically, I assume Choice Scarf, by far the most common item on Salamence, but it's going to come down to a really close battle here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen here. It could come down to the speed tie. It's possible that they're not the same speed. Sableye could use Swagger to try to disrupt this the tie here, but certainly the stand expiring there, really game-changing play there. One of the changes to this generation's mechanics.
Swagger is avoided by Gavin's Salamence, and it is going to be able to get the Dragon Pulse off onto Arash's Salamence, gets the KO, and a huge play, a huge avoid from Salamence on Gavin's side. You know, that's the risk of Swagger. It doesn't always connect, and Rotom is going to be able to connect with the Thunderbolt through confusion, so a little bit of damage on there, but every little bit counts against this Sableye right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge play, though. I mean, so the odds in your favor of moving the turn you get swaggered, you know, can miss, and there's only a 50-50 chance if you do get confused. So the more probable event happening there, but great spot for Gavin now.
Goes again onto the Salamence, does connect this time. We'll have to see if Salamence can do it again and pull off the Dragon Pulse through the confusion. Is it going to be able to? Yes, Salamence Dragon Pulse does connect with the Sableye. Unable to get the self-hit in there, and the KO. Of America takes the first game off of our defending world champion, Arash Ommati, out of Italy.
And the pressure's definitely on for Arash now. Like we mentioned before the game, you really don't want to lose this first one. He was very close to taking that game. Had that swagger worked out, maybe, actually, I think he almost definitely would have taken that game. So definitely just right, you know, that close. This game could easily go the other way, but he's got to be very careful now. The trouble of losing a close first game like that is unless you learned enough that you can kind of turn around the second and the third game by taking that loss, you know, you've got to eke out 2 close ones now in 2 tries. You know, you've lost all that margin for error. Also interesting to see that Gavin's choice not to use a Mega there was actually brilliant. That last Pokemon Salamence helping knock out 3 Pokemon in quick succession there. So you know, sometimes you don't need that Mega. You know, sometimes something else is more appropriate. He brings the best Pokemon for him there and is able to close the game very effectively there. So also kind of interesting to see in that game too. You know, luck kind of bounced both ways. You're thinking, you know, poor Gavin's Ludicolo, right? But at the end, the swagger just wasn't enough, and Gavin was able to get his attacks off there right when he needed to. So big battle there. I guess I'm curious if we'll see any adjustments here. Both sides probably feel like with the 4 Pokemon they both brought, they could have had a few decisions been made differently.
Right.
So I think really the only adjustment you can make that maybe surprised you that first game. I'm sure Arash is probably interested to learn that Lucario probably isn't a Mega, and Gavin is probably interested to see Sableye's moveset. He saw all 4 moves that game. I think some of the trouble of playing in Sableye's, it has a lot of really disruptive support moves. So you have to kind of play around what it might have. Having all the information now should make this game a little simpler for him. And information is a big deal in this game. You know, once you can realize all of the possibilities and consider them for him more than it would have hurt Gavin. So he's got to really get the advantage here.
Definitely going to be interesting to see how Arash adjusts, but it looks like he's decided that he's okay as he is, going with that Sableye Kangaskhan lead once again up against the Ludicolo and Heat Rotom on Gavin's side. Looks like Gavin's definitely trying to protect the Lucario a little bit more than last game, assuming that Lucario is in the back there. But both sides exerting some fake out pressure here, as we see Kangaskhan Mega Evolving turn 1, is not afraid of the threats on both sides of for Gavin. Is going to go ahead and Mega Evolve right in their face as the fake out comes out from Mega Kangaskhan onto the Ludicolo, dealing some great damage there thanks to that parental bond ability. As Sableye is going to go right ahead and Swagger, not going to go for the taunt onto that Heat Rotom. It's just going to go straight for the Swagger. We'll see if Heat Rotom did go for the Will-O-Wisp onto that Kangaskhan. That would be a huge play at the very first turn. The confusion goes through, but it just selects Overheat instead. Obviously trying to predict a switch out from that Kangaskhan there into one of the Pokemon in the back.
Well, I mean, maybe that, or I think that's sort of the advantage of having shown taunt in the previous game, is they don't always have to use it, because you know, any turn this Will-O-Wisp, or this Rotom wants to use Will-O-Wisp, it has to be like, well, maybe I'll get taunted, so I don't want to waste my turn. Maybe I should overheat instead. So Arash kind of wins the mind game there. No, not risk the burn, but taking all that damage instead isn't necessarily that much better. Probably all of Gavin's Pokemon will be able to capable of finishing it off now with their most powerful attack, other than this Rotom until it switches out and resets that special attack. So it's going to be a little more daring to try to make too many plays with it the rest of the game. I guess it's sort of the trouble of the Sableye Kangaskhan lead, right? Like, you've got the fake out with Kangaskhan, but when you don't have a partner next to it that can actually exert any offensive pressure, you're a little more limited with the plays you can make.
Right. And it looks like that Heat Rotom is going to go ahead and switch out to reset that special attack, as well as get rid of the confusion. The Intimidate coming out from Gavin's Salamence is going to make sure that Kangaskhan is not able to hit at full strength this first turn and baits out the taunt from Sableye. Kangaskhan is going right for the return onto the Ludicolo, identifying that as the threat here. Is going to be able to pick up the KO there. That's just how powerful Mega Kangaskhan is. Even with the Intimidate on it, is still able to pick up the KO against that Ludicolo.
That's a big knockout there. I was kind of wondering if the Ludicolo might be trained to survive that. Looked like it was going to be very close there, but that does get the knockout, so I guess not. At least we've got intimidated Kangaskhan out, so I guess it's still close positioning here. Kangaskhan's definitely not safe. It's probably going to want to switch out here since either of these Pokemon could knock it out. So a very tight game still, but a nice play by Arash there to take the Pokemon lead again. I'm sure he's not going to get too confident because of that, since he had the lead in the previous game also, but it's a big deal to get that positioning advantage. We also see Salamence a little sooner this time. Maybe Arash can start wearing this down faster. Salamence came in very late in the battle in the previous match. I think that was a big part of why Gavin won with it, so perhaps maybe get the swagger on it sooner, or even the burn just to start wearing it down will help out here.
Interesting switch. Kangaskhan is going to retreat in favor of that Tyranitar. Very dangerous switch with Sableye not being able to exert too much pressure on both of these Pokemon. You see the swagger coming out from Sableye onto the Heat Rotom again, going to try to make sure that Heat Rotom isn't able to do anything this turn. Goes ahead and gets the confusion. Salamence is going to go with the Dragon Pulse, likely on that Kangaskhan slot, but it's going to connect with that Tyranitar, dealing some decent damage. Of course, with the special defense boost, not a whole lot, and the confusion does connect on Rotom this time. Takes a little bit of chip damage there in addition to the Sandstorm damage here.
Yeah, so nice switch to get the Tyranitar in there. Both of these Pokemon have a hard time doing damage to Tyranitar. It's naturally a very bulky Pokemon, and with that boost from Sandstorm, it can deal with most of the attacks that Salamence does very well. Rotom doesn't, its typing just doesn't deal very well with Tyranitar's. So also not getting burned thanks to the help of Sableye there, so the threat of Rock Slide is pretty threatening right now.
And it looks like Gavin does think that Salamence is his biggest threat right now. He's going to go ahead and switch out. Lucario avoiding the swagger this time, and Will-O-Wisp is going to be able to connect. Snapping out of confusion, goes ahead and burns the Sableye, trying to get a little bit of extra damage on there, on that Pokemon here. As the Rock Slide is going to connect, deal some good damage to that Heat Rotom. Not too much onto the Lucario, of course, it resists it very much so. And the Life Orb shown from that Tyranitar there did deal a lot of damage, and it's going to be dealing a little bit back to itself.
Yeah, we did see it in the previous game. I think that's some of why maybe Arash being a little daring with his Tyranitar switching into Rotom. Even if it does get burned, it's very likely holding the Life Orb. It's also using some special attacks, so the worst case scenario just falls back on something like Ice Beam or like Fire Blast. But the damage in Rotom's a big deal here. I think that he really needs to get rid of it so that Kangaskhan can be a little bit safer, although Lucario, again, sort of creating that same amount of problem. It's still possible Lucario's holding a Mega Stone, even though he chose not to Mega Evolve last game. That could have been a bluff. It's not very likely, but we also know it doesn't have a Lumberry, so it's likely to see that Sableye try to get the burn on, though it's a fairly obvious play, so I'm sure Gavin will be expecting it, though. I don't know if he's going to want to get Salamence burned that much either, so it'll be interesting to see what both players do here.
Lucario is going to go just for a Protect, going to scout out what Arash's ideas are. The Will-O-Wisp does come out from Sableye, but into the Protect, as the Thunderbolt is going to come out from Heat Rotom onto the Tyranitar. Going to deal a little bit more chip damage there. Rock Slide into the Protect, and will connect with the Heat Rotom. Should be enough to pick up the KO there. Yep, Rotom does go down, and another Pokemon down on Gavin's side for Arash.
A daring play by Arash there. I mean, it looks like it's a safe knockout there since Tyranitar didn't end up getting attacked, but it was very likely that Lucario was going to use a close combat there and pick up the easy knockout on Tyranitar, but Arash cleverly, showing why he's a world champion there, anticipates that Gavin's not going to be willing to take that burn on Lucario for free as he switches into a Pokemon he'd like to take that attack a little bit safer. So he gets the free hit on Rotom there, and now it's a really dangerous situation. With only 2 Pokemon remaining on Gavin's side, he can no longer switch to get out of that confusion from Swagger, which is going to make it much more difficult for Salamence to do anything. If Salamence chooses a Draco Meteor, it's no longer going to be able to switch to reset that special attack. The same thing with Lucario's defenses and close combat. So a lot of Pokemon on, I guess both the Pokemon remaining on Gavin's side here, both really like the ability to come in and out, Can't reset that Intimidate anymore. We still have an alive Kangaskhan on Arash's side, even though it's pretty low health. So it's one of those Pokemon that, again, you want to cycle those Intimidates on. So could go either way still, but rough spot.
And we can see Arash putting on the pressure here right away. Goes ahead and burns the Lucario. Does connect Dragon Pulse. Going to go ahead and lock itself into that Dragon Pulse onto the Sableye. Wants to get rid of any swaggers coming out from there. As close combat, going to connect, pick up the clean KO onto Tyranitar there. Pretty safe play for the most part from Gavin there. Yeah,
from both sides, I'd say. I think the previous turn, Gavin had probably considered the possibility that Rock Slide has come out. I knew he might have to play out the situation. Arash was certainly expecting to get exactly what he got here, so I think both sides just kind of making sacrifices they think that they can handle, trying to end up with a couple Pokemon remaining at the end where they think they can win the duel. It's likely to end up with a fairly similar endgame to the previous game, though Arash has a bigger lead this time, so it's more likely he'll come out on top. We also see Sableye finally taking some damage here. You mentioned before that in the first game that Sableye was just getting ignored and getting all that disruption down, but some of the cost of that is that Sableye also didn't get a lot of momentum. So we saw one of Sableye's teammates going down last turn. Kangaskhan's been weakened. A lot of players, when they play against Sableye, do just ignore it because they feel like, it's not doing enough. If I just take out all the partners that actually do damage, I can get enough momentum. It doesn't really matter what Sableye is doing. I don't know if it happened fast enough this game where Sableye is going to faint almost certainly this turn, but the damage has kind of been done, especially if that swagger doesn't work again. It's going to be a big play.
Oh, and the follow me coming out from Lucario, definitely not going to let Sableye get any swaggers off onto that Salamence. Redirects the swagger onto Lucario. It's going to get the attack boost. That's great for the burnt Lucario. Will be confused now, but it does mean that Gavin's Salamence is going to get a free Dragon Pulse off onto Arash's Salamence. And is it going to be enough? No, not quite enough. That's why I usually go for the Draco Meteor. But the follow me is going to redirect that Draco Meteor from Arash over to Lucario. Will it be able to survive this one? Yes, just barely by 10, but of course with the burn chip damage, that Lucario is probably off of the field.
Yeah, see it go down here. Still an excellent play with the follow me there. And I'm sure he was hoping that Dragon Pulse would get him there. Perhaps the Salamence running a little bit of bulk so it doesn't occur, but Sableye survives as well.
The Sandstorm subsiding.
Yeah, second game in a row, the Sandstorm stopped at just the right time for one of the players. So Sableye surviving here is actually a big deal. Salamence likely to be choiced here, as we've at least seen implied in the previous game. So can't stop the swagger, can't protect to avoid it, and being swaggered for the rest of the game is really going to reduce the odds of Salamence being able to make the 1v3 comeback here.
Yeah, we're going to have to see if Salamence can pull off a miracle play here. The swagger does come out. Salamence is now confused. Will it be able to connect with the Dragon Pulse this time? No, it will not. It hits itself in its own confusion. And let's see if the opposing Salamence can land the Draco Meteor. Yes, and that's going to be a clean win for Arash. Really needed that win there.
Yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, not just because he would have lost the series had he lost the game, but going down 2-0 in your first
round,
especially because a lot of the other matches you completed, the other players have time to rest up. Coming off of a loss into a match very quickly, it's a tough situation to recover from. So good on him to get to this third game here. Keep the pressure on. Win or lose down, put up a good series. Two very close first games, and I think this definitely could go either way in the next one. I wouldn't be surprised if, similar to the second game, neither side switched up their plan too much here. I think they both know clearly, since they both did, that they can win using these matchups here. So just a matter of outsmarting each other. I think a big play that last game was Arash on the turn where Tarantula got that knockout on Rotom. He made the gamble and it paid off, and you've got to do that sometimes. You can't play Pokemon as a game. We're just making the safe move every turn with most teams, especially in this format. I think in the past, I mentioned before, the champion before Arash, Ray Rizzo, his playstyle tends to be based on that, where lots of very safe defensive switches, but it's tough to do this in this format with Pokemon like Kangaskhan that just put out so much damage that you've got to be willing to take some risks this time. And Arash takes
Ludicolo and Tyranitar. And of course, Arash at the top of your screen and Gavin on the bottom. Gavin going to go ahead and lead with that Lucario and Heat Rotom. And Arash, nothing's broke about it. Kangaskhan, Sableye.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to see him make the same lead 3 games in a row, especially because I don't feel like it's been especially effective for him. I mean, obviously the Sableye has been very, very disruptive, but Kangaskhan against a team like Gavin's with so many Pokemon designed to deal with that Kangaskhan is that it's tough to get going right off the gate. I'm not sure if maybe it would have been wiser or not for him to bring it from the back. Clearly it's worked out for him the last game. It was very close to working out the first game, but you just don't have the offensive pressure you normally have with Kangaskhan here when you're worried about a close combat from one Pokemon and burn from the other. You can only disrupt one Pokemon Sableye, and you see Kangaskhan having to retreat here.
Yep, Kangaskhan going back in favor of that Salamence. Salamence is going to go ahead and get the Intimidate off onto that Lucario. We've only seen attacking options from it as close combat so far, so definitely an effective use of Intimidate there to get burnt, but the swagger from Sableye onto that Heat Rotom is going to roll the dice again, do a little bit of gambling. Attack raises sharply and Confusion is active. We'll have to see what Rotom could do. Rotom is confused, is going to go for the Will-O-Wisp, but it is going to connect with that Salamence on the switch in. Not the ideal target, but we've seen how close these games have come. Every little bit of HP counts. So that chip damage could prove to be really important in this game.
Well, especially if you look at the last game, I think it could. A couple of turns of burn damage, and Salamence might be in range for that Dragon Pulse if a situation like the previous game happens again. That would have been game-changing last time, so that could definitely help here. I do think Arash won the guessing game, though. In the previous game, we saw that Rotom chose not to Will-O-Wisp in the first turn in fear of Taunt. And then Arash anticipated this and didn't switch Kangaskhan out because he knew that Gavin would respect it. This time, after not taunting the previous game, Rotom goes for the Will-O-Wisp, and it's on a target that doesn't mind being burned.
Yep, and the Lucario does not like being intimidated either, is going to switch out for the Ludicolo into the Swagger, though. Good play from Arash there, predicting that switch out. Ludicolo is going to be confused, going to make it a little bit more difficult, but the Fire Blast coming.
He knew that Gavin would respect it. This time, after not taunting the previous game, Rotom goes for the Will-O-Wisp, and it's on a target that doesn't mind being burned.
Yep, and the Lucario does not like being intimidated either, is going to switch out for the Ludicolo into the Swagger, though. Good play from Arash there, predicting that switch out. Ludicolo is going to be confused, going to make it a little bit more difficult, but the Fire Blast coming out, trying to cover all bases, but is going to miss Ludicolo. But looks like a bit of a wash turn here, as Heat Rotom is going to go ahead and hit itself in confusion as well. Just a little bit of chip damage on both sides.
Yeah, nothing too major there. Getting Ludicolo in will probably force out Salamence there, which enables Gavin an opportunity to make a play now. But I think that's twice in a row that Arash made the better play there. So maybe after losing that first game, he's starting to really hone in on Gavin's play style. He gets that Swagger in, which he most likely would not have wanted to give Lucario for free there, though had he would have eaten the Fire Blast anyway. So safe play by Arash.
Salamence is going to switch out, as you predicted. Ludicolo putting too much offensive pressure there into the Tyranitar, getting that sand back up. I feel like I've seen these Pokemon before. Taunt coming out from Sableye, probably onto that Heat Rotom. Yep, is going to prevent Rotom from getting any Will-O-Wisps off. Goes for the Thunderbolt, though, and snaps out of confusion to get some important damage onto Sableye. Good play there from Gavin. Worried about that taunt pressure. Scald coming out, though, from the Ludicolo onto the Tyranitar slot. Gets a super effective hit there, dealing some good damage. Doesn't get the burn, though. I'm sure he would have loved to have that.
It's still a great play by him there. It's pretty obvious that Salamence needed to go out there. So Ludicolo doing the right thing, not Ice Beaming instead, using Scald, which is better against all the possible switches here. It's likely, based on the previous game, you've seen the same four Pokemon facing off on both sides. So there's a decent chance it's going to be Tyranitar or Kangaskhan replacing it. Super effective on both on Tyranitar. Kangaskhan has to worry about the threat of a burn, so definitely the right play there.
Yeah, and definitely showing, we haven't seen too much out of Ludicolo in the game, but showing that it is an important member of Gavin's team. Swagger coming out from Sableye onto the Heat Rotom again. Just going to keep spreading that confusion and raising the attack, but the Overheat is going to be able to go through, but it avoids the Overheat. The Rock Slide is avoided by Ludicolo, but it is going to connect with that Heat Rotom. That's the one he wanted. It's going to deal some great damage there, while of course Sableye is going to be able to sit pretty without hitting that Overheat. Citrus Berry coming out to restore some health to Rotom. Confusion from Ludicolo. Is it going to be able to attack through? Gets the Giga Drain off through the confusion onto Tyranitar. Just enough. Super effective. Critical hit. Not quite just enough then. Is going to pick up the KO onto that Tyranitar as Tyranitar faints and goes back to Arash Ommati. A crucial KO there.
Yeah, with the life 4 damage, they're probably switching to Giga Drain just to heal up a little bit, anticipating getting that knockout. Big KO there. It definitely makes it more difficult to use Salamence here. You lose that relatively safe switch. The two Pokemon cover each other very nicely there. And we see Kangaskhan coming in here. It's a good turn for it to come in here against both these Pokemon. They can do quite a bit of damage to. Rotom, after consuming that Citrus Berry, no longer going to be able to deal with attacks from it very well. Return would easily knock it out here.
And go right into that Mega Kangaskhan form and use the return going straight on the offensive onto the Heat Rotom, gets the KO in one hit. Mega Kangaskhan is just so strong. Easy KO there. Ludicolo again confused, trying to see if it can get another attack through. Gets the Scald off through the confusion, again onto the Kangaskhan. Will it get the burn this time? No burn, but foul play coming out from Sableye. Going to deal some good damage to Ludicolo thanks to all those Swagger boosts.
Yeah, that's kind of the nice synergy of Sableye's moveset. Foul play does damage based on your opponent's attack, so by raising your attack with Swagger, you actually get to do more damage yourself.
Especially against special attackers who can't even use the attack boost.
Right, yeah, so there's no drawback of raising the attack, but there is a big advantage, especially for Ludicolo there. Pokemon that's very bulky on the special side, but frailer physically, so very vulnerable to the strategy that Sableye is using here. Now a second foul play would knock it out there, so there's a lot more. It's harder to stay in safely here. You know that if you do stay in, you're taking a much bigger risk than you might be otherwise. Salaman's getting that Intimidate out there, and Kangaskhan does put him in a slightly better position here, but it's still, you've got one Pokemon that could easily be knocked up by either of your opponents, and one that's in a safer position. So you have to think a little bit what he wants to do here. It's very dangerous to switch because the remaining Pokemon on Arash's side is Salamence, who is burned, and we've seen it's probably going to be in range of Dragon Pulse, a burn, and a Sandstorm tick now. So he's going to have to play this really careful if he does want to make any switches on his side. On Gavin's side, a little lower risk, so you should be okay here, I think.
And it looks like Ludicolo is going to switch out, does not want to take any additional damage into the Lucario. Swagger coming off onto that Salamence again. Just going to keep making sure that Gavin has no certainty over his side here. We see Salamence is going to try to get an attack off. Gets the Draco Meteor, selecting Draco Meteor this time onto that Mega Kangaskhan. Is it going to be enough? We've seen Dragon Pulse only so far, and the Draco Meteor is going to connect. It's going down, down, not quite enough. Mega Kangaskhan hanging on just by a sliver of HP there. Power up punch onto the Lucario, predicting that switch, getting a boost there, but hanging on just on a sliver there. Not great position for Kangaskhan, but some important damage onto the Lucario.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. At least the power punch keeps Arash in the game here. I think he'd definitely be in very
so
big
close.
trouble otherwise. Even as it is, he's going to have to make a dangerous prediction here. He can. Salamance's probably not going to want to just take the Sucker Punch from the boosted Kangaskhan here. He could switch out. If he does so, he's going to want to attack instead.
Could use Follow Me.
Yeah, Follow Me is a threat here. There's so many plays that Gavin has now, and Kangaskhan has to be very careful. If it stays in, it's going to be knocked out by the sand here, so there's that threat. But also, if he switches out and a Dragon move targets that slot, he can lose the back Pokemon for free, and it's a little health. Kangaskhan would be pretty easy to finish off, too. It's going to be really difficult for Arash to try to find a way where he has a realistic chance of winning this game that doesn't involve a bunch of Swagger. If he has to fall back on that, so be it. But part of using that move at this level is knowing that you can't just gamble. Like, you have to try to find your highest percentage win condition. A very difficult turn here.
Oh, the extreme speed coming out from Lucario. No Sucker Punch needed on Kangaskhan's side. Gets the KO. Lucario takes out its foe, the Kangaskhan, and avoids the Will-O-Wisp. The roll's just not working out for Arash this time, but does get the confusion onto the Salamence on Gavin's side. And of course, again, the sand is subsiding, but no Pokemon surviving thanks to that this time.
But it would have, right? I guess I was wrong there. He could have chosen to withdraw that there. I'm sure he wasn't expecting the extreme speed from Lucario. It's not a very common attack on it. Usually if you see a priority move on a support Lucario like this, you expect it to be Bullet Punch because it gets the bonus for being a Steel type. But the advantage of extreme speed is that it's a higher priority than other priority moves. So instead of going by the order of speed, it just gets to go first. So the slower Lucario attacking before Kangaskhan and getting that knockout there, even if it had tried to use Sucker Punch.
Gavin's going to go ahead and switch that Salamence out, hoping to reset the special attack drops and potentially able to lock itself into the more accurate Dragon Pulse coming out. Protect from Lucario does eat the Fire Blast from Salamence as Foul Play coming off on Ludicolo. No Swagger Boost this time, so it doesn't deal a lot of damage. Ludicolo just barely hanging on there as well. Potentially showing a Fake Out threat though, which Arash has to be concerned about.
Yeah, both the threat of Fake Out or just an Ice Beam. Ludicolo could just choose to try to knock it out here. Salamence, because of that, might have to try to Fire Blast Ludicolo slot just to not risk being knocked out by it. It's likely that Lucario doesn't have a way of knocking out Salamence here, so it could be free for another turn that way. There's also the option of using Sableye to try to Swagger, but like I mentioned before, that's a big gamble, and I'm expecting he won't go that route just because you're putting lots of RNG there, but I guess because of Follow Me, it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
Lucario using that Follow Me, going to make sure that any attack onto Gavin's side is going to be taken by that Lucario. Is going to faint thanks to that Fire Blast, though, finally connecting, which will allow that Sableye to get something off onto the Ludicolo, but goes for the Foul Play, so Ludicolo is faster and able to get the Ice Beam, feints the Salamence, and it's only Sableye left for Arash. And Foul Play might be able to pick up the KO here, but up against Salamence, not your best odds.
Maybe. I think this is actually a really interesting duel. Unfortunately, this one's probably going to come down to rolling the dice a little bit, but a nice play by both sides there. But I think I'm actually happier if I'm Gavin because he has the higher odds for the rest of his game here. Getting 2 knockouts in a turn for 1 is normally a good thing, but this duel is sort of the doomsday scenario if you're a Sableye player. You really don't want to come down to just your 1 support Pokemon.
And here it comes, Swagger making its appearance here as the deciding match of this, the first round of the VGC here in DC. Salamence is confused, is going to connect, hit itself in its own confusion. That's some important damage on Salamence's side.
It's not over yet, though. It's not over yet. If Salamence gets the attack through this turn, a Draco Meteor could still knock it out.
And we'll see, Salamence still confused, does get the Draco Meteor up, is going to connect onto that Sableye. We'll have to see if it's going to be exactly enough. The health bars are going down, Sableye is losing health, and it does faint, and Gavin Michaels takes round 1 in the first round of Swiss here in DC, defeating our defending world champion, Arash Ommati. And that's not a loss. You can see it on his face. That's not a loss he expected to take.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to that, just that close. You have 50-50 chance in the last turn there. Actually, a little bit less than that, I guess, because Joe Draco Meteor could have missed.
Right.
So Raj, he gets down to that final turn. He feels like he's got a little advantage there, but it just doesn't roll for him there.
Yeah.
Really, really close game there. You can't ask for much more than that the first